now 8:37. We completed executive session with no action to report. I'm calling the business section of our meeting back into order. And the first thing that we start with is our Pledge of Allegiance. And I'm going to ask our student member on the board, Brent Johnson, to please lead us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In case of an emergency, please make sure you know where the exits are so you can leave safely and quickly. This is a smoke-free school district. No smoking anywhere on campus. It's also a hate-free school district, so no hate speech, symbols, or bullying are permitted on any premises in the school district. We now have the board consent agenda. I'd like to do, let's do items C, 1, 2, and 3. Is there a motion to approve 1, 2, and 3? Ms. Arruda? Ms. Ancona, second. Any questions or discussions? Seeing none, all in favor? Unanimously approved. Next would be item C4. Is there a motion to approve item C4? Mr. Trent, a second. Ms. Arruda, any questions or discussions?
I have a question.
Yes.
I noticed in the treasurer's report, there are a couple items on page 23 where we spent some money that wasn't budgeted for. Support staff, UPK, and things under that. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
23 on the digital version or on the written page, just the digital line on?
I think this is the PDF file.
Hold on just a minute. Where?
I'm saying there's numbers on the pages that you see.
Oh, you know when you write it and you circle it?
The one that circles, so that's 23.
Now, what number is that?
23, which is 24 on the digital.
All right, so 23 with the circle around it.
I'm going to have to actually get back to you on that. I'm not sure. It could just be that that as we set up the new year, they roll over employees from one year to the next, and the codes are already hard coded in the system, and therefore they just pay something where it was last year. And we start to unravel all that as we set up the grants, and the grants get approved, and we move things to where they need to be. But if you give me a second, hang on, I may be able. Just give me 1 second.
I think it's.
There's two, one for 78, 770, and one for 15, 770.
But I also have similar questions on page 21, where there are items that are spent that weren't budgeted for.
Well, in the July treasurer's report, we are paying people, and we're still waiting for the state to approve the grants and set up the budgets for all of those. So the grants physically get set up with budgets after the state approves them, but we continue to pay people because they roll over and they're still employees here, and they get charged to the grants that they are. As we move through the process and all the grants are approved, you'll start to see through the year that those all change because grants are set up as the state approves those budgets. So you may see nothing in the appropriation line to start. That's only because the state hasn't approved it yet.
So now we were paying staff for UPK currently, or is this from last year?
That's what I was trying to look up quick before we just,
So, you could get back to me.
let me get back to you on exactly what's in there. I'm sure that's what it is.
Basically, if I can understand what you're saying, is that we just haven't received the grant money yet. So is that why we go in arrears in that line?
It could be that, Mr. Buccini, but it's more likely that someone had a code last year. Let's say it was someone who worked a responder code, and their budget code is hard coded on the payroll side, so they continue to receive their pay in the next year. But we're not going to be charging, a responder who might have been last year charged to UPK is now placed in a different building
Oh,
for
I see
next
what you're
year.
saying. So the responder pool of budgeted monies doesn't necessarily change, just where that is within the building or something, it gets shifted around.
Correct, as we move people around and, we move people to all places in the district, their codes get
Sure.
changed in the first couple of months of the school year.
Okay, thank you.
Did that help, Mr. Trustee?
I just want to know specifically, are these people still being paid currently who are, UPK support staff? Is that?
So for example, the custodian who used to be at South Haven, his code could be at UPK last year.
Yeah.
We rolled over in July and began to pay him, but he has been placed somewhere else in the district, and that is not his code.
Okay.
It will ultimately not be his code. We will recode all those people. The grants get looked at and recoded as the state approves, and we know what employees are being charged there. We then will adjust everyone's budget codes, and it actually gets recoded back to the beginning of the year.
Okay, got it.
Question, when it says, a title and then COVID next to it, does that mean that line comes out of the COVID money, the grant money that we received?
There were two intents of that. One is to track what we might have been spending for COVID-related items, and then also of that money, to use that to apply for that first tranche of CARES Act money that was originally, it was about $996,000 for us. We then had to file with the government, what did we spend for that 996? We tracked those through the COVID codes. We spent more than 996,000 in those codes.
Okay, so when it says like janitor COVID and 0, that doesn't mean that there's no janitor cleaning for COVID. That just means that we're not spending the money on that.
Yes, and
Okay.
you're probably seeing that code because the codes all roll over from one year to the next also.
Okay, thank you.
I have one question for you. Mine is on digital page 25, but circle page 24. And it has to do with the construction at Kramer.
Yep.
Okay. So the $1.3 million, that was for all the window construction and the vestibule, I would assume, or just windows?
Both of those, correct.
Okay. Because what was very noticeable in our building tour is how wonderful the windows look at Kramer. It was a remarkable difference.
Yeah.
And we know many other schools need windows. So that's what I'm looking at this report to say, about that money that is what we would need for other schools.
Are we looking at that as a number to do for other schools? Well, remember, that money came from the capital reserve. We're not going to authorize that use yet. We certainly don't have any other budget. As we get closer, we'll have to make some decisions on what we want to do, whether windows outweigh roofs.
The difference in the windows at Kramer is just remarkable.
Well, you can see through.
And now they treat them.
We actually got, Ms. Felice, we actually got a tremendous price. We actually went out to bid on that right at the beginning of COVID when the world was shutting down in the pandemic. So contractors were nervous as to whether they have jobs. So we received an exceptional good bid on that project. Since then, we know about the supply chain issues that are plaguing just the country, and our architects actually have said to us, any jobs that you've done in the past, a minimum 20% increase in what you saw just recently. So just to give you, you asked about how much it would cost.
Right.
We got a very good deal on those windows, and I don't think it was related to the situation at the time.
And then the money that's encumbered, that's to account for what we've already anticipated has to be spent.
Yeah, we have not paid them all out. Actually, we just got a payment request in today, so that job is not even at punch list stage yet. From the payment perspective, from the job perspective, you may see it complete, but from the payment perspective, we are still paying them.
Okay, thank you very much.
Do you have any other questions or comments from the board? All right, all in favor of approving, raise your hand, it's unanimously approved. we're now down to, communication and announcements, so Dr. Gianni.
Yes, thank you. First couple comments on our opening days. Opening days were quite smooth as we welcomed 3,992 youngsters back to school. We did experience some transportation issues, as we generally do, particularly with delays and latencies, most of which have been resolved. However, we are still working on a number of issues that are still there. Due to driver shortage, we are experiencing issues with transportation for our after-school programs, particularly in scholastic athletics. It's no doubt that we'll also be experiencing continued concerns when it comes to other after-school programs, possibly clubs. Hopefully, we'll be able to get some more drivers in to be able to support that. We're very fortunate that we have a full slate of drivers for the daytime, not many substitutes, unlike some other districts who are having challenges during the daytime. But we are at a shortage with after school, and some of our athletic contests will be combined. Sometimes they'll be changed, and sometimes other events will even be canceled as a result of that. So we are continuing to work with our transportation provider, who is of course working on their recruiting efforts, but we are having some challenges at the school.
So at the Nassau Suffolk School Board meeting Monday night, there was a roundtable I mentioned briefly in exec. I brought this up as an issue that we're having. Many districts are having it. I think it was Plainview. I can't remember the district. They had a similar issue, a little bit out of the box. They figured out that they had 7 or 8 employees from their maintenance department who had CDLs. Their bus company actually rented them the bus and had their employees drive them. So in an extreme situation, I mean, it's something maybe we can look into if it's necessary. How we can, I don't know what the bus company was. I don't know if town bus would permit that. But it might be an opportunity to help out a bad situation, because some of the stories I'm hearing from some athletes, parents, and kids getting home at 11 o'clock at night, having to cancel contests because bus aren't showing up, etc. So, and I guess I would also look into, I mean, if this is still an issue, for example, let's say the winter time, maybe we can go rent a 15 passenger van, and the basketball team can be able to fit 15 passengers. I mean, we might have to really think out of the box if we get into winter, if the whole additional unemployment, if that's really isn't the issue, and we don't get workers back. We may have to look into that. Have to think it wouldn't cost much to go rent a couple of 15 passenger vans, and some of our smaller teams, tennis team, the golf team, basketball team, we could probably alleviate some of the pressure.
I just misunderstood what Trustee Puccini said. So we're suggesting people in our district that have CDL license drivers?
No, employees of the district.
Employees.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't know how big, I think it was Plainview, I don't know how big their district is, to whether or not they have, I don't know how many people we have on our maintenance staff. We might not have any, but we might have 3 or 4 people with CDLs who wouldn't mind some overtime driving kids to, an athletic event or something like that. I don't know what the legality is. If you have a CDL, doesn't mean you have a passenger endorsement. There's a lot to do it, but I just think out of the box. Maybe we can alleviate some of the pressure we're having there. It's like I just remembered it. My son graduated. For me, it was difficult because he was diabetic. I needed to make sure he had access to food and medication. So when you go to an away game and you leave the school at 3:30, on a good time, when things are working well, you might not get home till 9 o'clock. You get a kid home 11, 12 o'clock at night. They've got to eat. They've got homework. They need rest. I mean, there's a lot of stressors. And you put that on a middle school kid, that's even worse. It's just younger and harder to deal with it. So I would hope that our coaches, maybe our athletic director, and I know we're in flux here a little bit right now, can make sure that there's some contingency plans. We have some fruit, we have some snacks, or something on the bus, so we can order some pizzas or something. That's a difficult thing. Some of these kids they get to school at 6 in the morning, they want to get home till 10 o'clock at night. Stop.
Okay, we'll take a look at that. Next item, as you may be aware, the New York State Department of Health issued updated school guidance for classroom instruction for the 21-22 school year. Within the latest regulation is the requirement for weekly COVID-19 testing for all school employees. In order to meet that mandate, school districts will be required to implement a weekly COVID testing in accordance with timelines and procedures established by the New York State Department of Health along with the Suffolk County Department of Health. I anticipate that deadline and implementation to be over the next couple of weeks. While testing is not yet mandatory, the county is encouraging any school employees, especially those unvaccinated, to take advantage of an opportunity to pilot the system that is being planned to be put in place. And Suffolk County has launched 2 testing sites for school employees. These sites are open on a pilot basis at first and will then be part of a larger testing program if it is successful. I did send the notice out to all of our staff last night, and those sites are today, Wednesday, December 15th, at H. Lee Dennison Building from 2 to 8 p.m. Walk-in by appointment only, and then again on Saturday, on September 18th, at Smith Point County Park from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., and that's going to be a drive-through, and no offense is necessary. Within the mandate, the state has included an opt-out mechanism for fully vaccinated individuals, meaning as per regulation, employees who are fully vaccinated may opt out of this weekly testing requirement. Currently, the district is exploring the most efficient way and procedure that we can manage the opt-out mechanism for whenever regulation does become mandatory. Next item, I'm happy to report to enhance communication for our families. The district has purchased a district subscription to the popular Remind app, currently used by many of our faculty. Our review of the application revealed 2.5 million messages were sent out last school year in South Country. Staff are currently using Remind. We recently learned that the application can link to our student management system. Needless to say, the application is well used by faculty, so we move forward with the purchase. And that subscription is in place, and we are hopeful by the end of the week will be available for teachers to use. And a second reminder went out today or yesterday with regard to teachers being able to use that. Yes.
Quick question on that. Will that be the only authorized communication app for parents? I'm hearing from some parents that there's a little bit of angst that different teachers are using a different platform, and it gets a little convoluted that way.
So to require them to use it, I'm going to have to confer with counsel. I think that would be subject to negotiation. As a result, but since it is incorporated with a student management system, and like I said, many of our faculty are already using it, I think it's going to be more available and more readily used by our faculty.
I would think though, and I get where you're going with, having to be negotiated, which, I feel about.
And I don't know that to be accurate.
Yeah, but I would think that we would be without having negotiations, that if you're going, I think, if you say you have to use this communication on that to be negotiated, you say if you use an app for texting communication, it has to be this one. Wouldn't that be the way to frame it, to avoid negotiations?
I'm gonna defer to counsel at a later date, because I don't even want to put her on the spot at this point. I mean, I think the encouragement and the advantages of using the app that integrates with our student management system alone is going to be enticing for faculty to use, if they're using them.
Yeah, if they are, just like I said, there's just some instances of multiple platforms within the same student that creates confusion.
Agreed.
I just want to thank you for that, something that I have, spoke about for the past year, and I know Mrs. Doyle and myself have talked about it. I definitely think it's going to be a great way for communication for us all to have the same communication app. I know after we had spoke, we're still going to keep the Blackboard Connect for administration. And I'm hoping moving forward that if we find that we're having success with the Remind app, that we may even encompass then using Remind from administration as well. But I think that's something that we have to look at come next year.
I think some already do.
Right, but I'm saying even from central administration as opposed to, so when the emails and things go out that you can blast out a remind to the faculty or to the public or however you're going to do. But I think that's something that we'll move into next year.
I'm going to need a tutorial.
That's all right. I know you
I need one as a
do.
parent. Listen, I need one as a parent.
Did someone else have a comment?
I was just gonna comment that, the district did get a letter from a member of the public about the different platforms and asking about it, and I thought, well, this is a great opportunity for Dr. Tiani to announce what's been done and what's being worked on, because it's a way to solve that problem. And I'm glad to hear your report tonight.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, we currently have some openings in our pre-K program at South Haven. 5 for full day, 1 for AM, and 1 for PM. So if you're out there and you're listening or watching and you have a pre-K youngster that's not in the program yet, please contact our central registration office. Phone number 631-730-1617. And that is all I have for you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So we're up for trustee and advisory committee reports. I'll start with Ms. Aruda.
Would you like to start? No, with me or, okay. Nothing really, I just want to piggyback on what you said about the transportation. Dropping off my son at the high school each and every day since the beginning of the school year. I want to thank the responders and the APs. The drop off has become much smoother, and it's going much faster, so I want to thank them for that. And that's really all.
Mr. Parker? Okay. Mr. Pacini?
I have some comments, but I think it's an agenda item. I think you put on the resolutions for
Yes.
NISBA. So I can hold my, there was a meeting this week for NASA
Can
something.
you
So-
report it during?
Yeah,
the
I could talk about it on there. And then, I guess that's really it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have Mr. Trent,
No,
Ms. McClellan.
I just have one comment, and, about the football teams. I wanna know why JV and varsity football teams don't use the turf. Like, parents are baffled in the stands as to why their soccer playing on, a football, while we're having football games, that soccer's practicing or another team's practicing over there. And I really feel like, especially, just in pride in general of how pretty that stadium is, I don't understand why they're playing on the old field.
Well, I'll tell you 2 reasons off the top of my head, but I don't want to say that that's the accurate reason. Number 1, some coaches prefer grass, right? And number 2, the turf field faces in the wrong direction, the sun.
No coach would want to play on
So
it.
you have a kickoff and you have the sun glaring on your eyes.
I think they can build it, but.
They built it the wrong direction.
It just, I feel like it's so much nicer and it's bigger, and we used it before. I mean, we used it for a middle school game before, for football, so.
And we couldn't, I don't think we had the breach capacity.
You don't have to do stands.
I think, well, for the JV turnout, I definitely think that there's definitely enough
You'd have to have both
seats,
people on
but,
the side.
Yeah.
yeah,
Which
but,
is
I
not
mean,
something.
maybe they could use it a little more often if it's.
When you bring that up, the problem is that field needs to be replaced.
Yeah, because
That's
that's something we
safety
understand.
Which
concerns.
field, the
The
one
turf
we're
field.
using, oh, the turf?
I have some safety concerns with that field.
Okay.
I do want that Brenda has some safety concerns with that field as well, but I'm not gonna push on.
Yeah, I don't know, everybody else is using it, I just didn't see why football was, and just parents were wondering too in the stands, so I'm like, I don't know, that's a good question. Cause, last football season was all convoluted because of COVID, but this time it started on time and I noticed.
I think if that field ever does get replaced and whatever, that's a bigger conversation. It needs to be, well, in my opinion, the grass field needs to be made turf, and that should be probably revert back to grass or some other usable.
Yeah, it
But
just,
that's a bigger conversation. It's gotta be done right the next time, in my opinion.
No, I agree.
okay, that's all I just had, thank you.
All right. And down to Ms. Felice and me, and I don't want us to duplicate, so I will yield to you. 'Cause,
Okay. We seem to travel the same circles, is that what you're saying?
yeah, because I know we both did the webinar, so.
Okay, just want to speak to the building tour that took place on the 28th. It was, again, very, very gratifying to see the work that's done by our administrative staff at each of the schools, and certainly our custodial staff and support staff. The schools are looking excellent. And, just a comment that I actually referred to in the treasurer's report, the windows of those schools that really need it, I think it's something we have to look into this year, because it was such a noticeable difference when I went from Kramer to Burnt Crest, and you cannot see out the windows. Just another comment about windows, however, in asking, about the installation of the windows at Kramer, because of school safety issues now, windows have to be so that you cannot see in. You can see out, but you can't see in, and that's because of some of the safety issues that we've had experienced in schools. So there's extra cost, I'm sure, because of that, but just things to consider. The other issue in our tour that is causing an additional cost, just like when we all get new phones and they change the application for your charging apparatus, so too has the charging apparatus changed for our Chromebooks. And we have charging units now that will become obsolete. I understand the superintendent is looking to move some of those charging units to elementary schools so that we can utilize as many of them. But I just think it's a real crime that these companies really, tie the hands of school districts. And now we have to buy all new charging systems for a device that's supposed to aid us in teaching. So another observation that was not the fault of the district, but just unfortunate to see what happens for school districts and why costs escalate that we have no control over. So, lockers, some noise was, or concern about lockers was raised on social media. Recently, I made an observation in our tours that the locker, even the condition of the lockers at Frank P. Long especially, are just in really poor condition, and if the district could look at something there. I don't know why we've decided not to use lockers, but just so that the district is aware, there is some concern now, so perhaps you can report to us at the next meeting.
I'm gonna report to you this evening.
Okay, very well. And then, yes, as the president mentioned, we both attended a call to order, a free webinar, that we are entitled to attend just from our membership in the New York State School Board Association. And it was about dialogue between the board and the community and getting the community's input in a way that's respectful to both sides. The seminar re-emphasized how the meetings of the Board of Education are just that. They are meetings of the board in which the public is permitted to observe. And certainly where the dialogue is not required, but it is desired, so that we do get input from the stakeholders, but not a place for that dialogue. And we certainly don't want to experience discord, and sometimes that discord happens when members don't feel like they're being heard. So I think we do a pretty good job of taking in the input from our community, and that it gave me a chance to recognize another perspective of people coming to the podium to speak to us, that it's not personal, it's the position that we're taking, and why emotions come into it. So it really gave us a lot of room for thought, and it told me we're on the right track. There's always room for improvement, and I did exchange some of those ideas with the president, so hopefully we'll see some of that in the future, but I just really enjoyed attending it. And that's it.
I won't repeat what you said about it, but I will comment that every time I've participated in a webinar from the New York State School Boards Association, I have learned something, and I've come away with a different way of looking at certain things and figuring out ways to incorporate what I've heard and what we're doing. So this particular webinar, I just got an email that had a link to the recording, so when I get home, I'll get it out to everybody. You might want to take an hour and a half and just listen. And one of my takeaways from the webinar is a lot of the things that they were suggesting about, communicating with the public and the order that needs to be maintained in order for us to do our business. We've already been doing that. We just kind of didn't realize that it was like an issue. And I think that I felt pretty good that as a board, we've been able to have some rather passionate discussions between us and disagreements, but we've been able to come to a consensus that works for the best interest of everybody, which is it's a pretty tough thing to do in general, and it's been particularly tough over the last year and a half. So that was good, and I was just going to report also on my observation of the first day of school. And of course, they mentioned the transportation issues, but those are getting addressed. But I kept just focusing on the kids, and at the different schools that I went to, the kids were all happy. They were all ready to go in. They were ready. This was a very good event for them, and that's what made me say this is going to work. This is why we're here. So I just wanted to let you know that my observation of the kids at all levels on that particular day was a good one. So let's go next. Public commentary. Do we have any? Oh, I'm so sorry. That's what happened. You're our newest member, and I wanted you to hear everybody else to just kind of hear about what we do for reports. And by doing it, I got there and I failed to go back. So thanks for reminding me.
Thank you. I wanted to say thank you all for having me. I'm very excited and honored to be the voice of the student body. Everyone is excited to be back in classes, and the excitement continues after school as our campus is buzzing with athletics and spectators. They have also renovated our tennis courts and added Belport High School banners on the lamppost to welcome people. On September 10th, students at the Belport High School gathered to honor the heroics of our local community 9/11 volunteers at Ground Zero. The high school also gathered to dedicate a tree in the Veterans Courtyard to Corporal James E. London. James is a Belport High School graduate who was killed in Iraq. Corporal London's Gold Star wife was in attendance as Principal De La Rosa, and the entire 11th grade placed flowers under the tree that was dedicated in his honor. Participating in our ceremony were the U.S. Army and the U.S. Marines. Guest speakers included 9/11 participants representing the Navy SEALs, Principal De La Rosa on behalf of her brother. Brookhaven, Belport, and Hagerman Fire Departments, the FDNY, and the NYPD. And that's what was in the blue folder that I handed. It was a very emotional ceremony. The students in all social studies and English classes have been learning and researching 9/11 since the first day of school. After the ceremony, the NYPD, fire, EMS, and medical survivors of 9/11 stayed the rest of the day participating in a question and answer session via remote learning. On behalf of the Student Council, we thank Mrs. De La Rosa for hosting such a well-done event. We all learned so much. On Monday, we had our first Student Council meeting. We had a great turnout and saw lots of new faces. This past Tuesday, the Student Council hosted our annual ice cream social. We had individually packaged ices, we were outside and socially distant. We had a great turnout, and it was great to see the students interact with each other and watch them meet new people. We are starting to plan Club Day. We will use Google Forms to sign up for the clubs to make it COVID-friendly. On Club Day, each club will decorate a table, and the students will stay after to see what different clubs they're interested and would like to join. We will also post a video for Virtual Club Day to the Student Council and Class Google Classrooms. In addition, we are planning homecoming. We will have a parade with floats, and our dance will be outside on October 16th. I would like to thank everyone involved in their efforts to get us back in school. I think it's really good to see everyone back. But like Ms. Felice said, was the lockers. That's a concern that I see among the student body. As it starts to get cold out too, people will be bringing in their jackets and we'll have nowhere to put them. So I just would like to add that. But thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing up that perspective of particularly the locker problem. And thank you, Dr. Gianni, for looking into all of that.
You're welcome.
Okay, public commentary, do we have any cards? None? Items for discussion.
I think that's me.
It is.
Okay, we're gonna move to item 1, which is the reopening. As I mentioned earlier, we had a smooth opening this school year, which included the implementation of our reopening plan. We were way ahead of preparation and spot on with anticipation, and ultimately what was intended, which allowed for an early board approval, so I thank the board for that. I also thank the administration, faculty, and staff for a flawless implementation of the plan. We had a really nice opening this school year. We have revisited the need to do temperature checks upon entry into the buildings and have determined to continue that practice. It's really not holding up kids coming in. It's not a requirement. We just did it anyway because we wanted to be on the safe side. Principals would like to continue that, and I concur with that. We are permitting small group field trips on a case-by-case basis, but as I mentioned earlier, transportation is really an issue this school year, and unfortunately, I'm concerned that transportation may be the reasons why we can't do some of those trips. So we are looking at things on a case-by-case basis. We're trying to get back to normal. We're not looking at full grade level trips because I'm not interested in experiencing any type of a super spreader. But obviously, where we can go outdoors and do small groups, we're going to do that. We will need to revisit the hall and sport locker situation, as Bryn mentioned and police mentioned as well. But for now, they're going to remain unassigned. Sport lockers, I think we are allowing football in their locker room because of the heavy equipment. We're going to look at the other teams as well, and we're going to examine the hall locker situation. I'll be honest with you, the hall lockers, the reason why we stopped doing that was the congregation. Okay, we still need to do contact tracing for when kids accumulate that 15 minutes throughout the day, and that can happen with a hall locker. Okay, I don't want to say anything against students or anything. You know, the locker opens and it kind of doesn't shut right away. You know, everybody gathers, they talk, and they congregate. And those are the things that we're trying to avoid. But we are going to look at this. Spoke with Ms. Delray earlier today. And that's really all I have with regard to reopening. Unless there's any questions or comments on the comments.
Yeah, I have 2 questions. Since we're having an issue with transportation for field trips, can we see if we can get assemblies, like small assemblies or more group speakers into the building if kids can't go out?
Yeah, we're doing a soft rollout on everything. I think you heard Bryn mention the ice cream social at the high school. So we are definitely looking at those.
Okay, and the other thing with the lockers, if it's too much with contact tracing and signing them to all, can we try to figure out maybe kids can sign up if they want a locker? Because I know some kids never go to the locker because it's not convenient. So maybe if, let's just say half the student body wants a locker, then at least if they sign up, we can kind of socially distance the lockers a little, and not everybody's going to their lockers at the same time.
That was a suggestion made,
Okay.
but like I said, we just started talking about it. But we will look at that as well. You're welcome. And then lastly, I know the sponsor.
So, I just have a couple things on reopening. So, the lock thing, I appreciate you looking into it, I get it, I would ask that it not linger, because I know it's not an issue right now, but I think Bryn mentioned it, it's gonna be, cold weather soon, it's gonna be a month away, so I don't think this should linger. Many districts have gone back to using lockers. I get there's concerns about congregation, but passing's only a few minutes. I can't imagine the kids that they're locking more than a minute in between periods at most. You know, and it seems like a good thing is that some teachers are actually going, you know, doing more, you know, written work, more pen and paper, more pencil and paper with notebooks. So now you're adding notebooks on top of Chromebooks and everything else. There's something to be said about that backpack on a kid's backpack as kids are younger. It's those things are heavier than you think. So I think it's something that needs to be looked into and addressed sooner than later. I appreciate the administration's comments on temperature checks. Again, as the weather becomes inclement getting into the building, you have kids standing outside waiting in the rain and in the cold to get checked. I personally, if it's not a requirement, I don't really see the need for it, specifically since some of these kids have been sitting side by side in the bus for up to 30 to 40 minutes on the way to school, so to have their temperature taken once they get there seems like it's kind of meaningless. So I would be curious to know how many times last year temperature checks actually discovered somebody who was entering school with COVID, or even flagged for a high temperature. It just seems like a wasteful process that, you know, could go away if it could. And then I have some questions on quarantines that we've seen thus far. I have some concerns with the new guidelines and the fact that seems to me that we have more quarantines than I would have anticipated. So I'm curious, and I know I've asked questions, and I know there was an issue with cafeteria at the middle school with how the setup was. But, you know, I think it was 3 or 4 people between staff and students who were quarantined at the high school. And I don't know that that was a cafeteria issue based on the letter received today. It just seems like, you know, with the fact that if everybody's wearing a mask when they're supposed to, there shouldn't be as many quarantines. So either we're not enforcing the mask policies, and full disclosure, I don't particularly agree with the mask policies, but if it prevents quarantines, then that's a good thing. Or are we being a little overzealous in how we're determining who was in close contact? So I'm a little concerned there.
So what you're not seeing is the number of times that we're having reports of COVID positives and there are no close contacts. So the reduction in people being quarantined as a result of close contact is happening.
Well, we are seeing that in the numbers. We're seeing total COVIDs and listing whether or not they're quarantined or not.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Right? I'm not really, that's the data that's in, right? We had 5 COVID positives. We've determined X amount have to be quarantined because of those positives. So,
okay, the situation at the middle school is a little different than the others. I can't speak to the high school because I haven't looked into one that you're talking about today. The middle school, the reason you see a greater number is because of the way the lunch is arranged because of the size of the class and the room in the cafeteria. I think there's a couple of periods, maybe 2, I'm not sure, where the kids are separated 3 feet apart, but eating 6 feet. So when a student is COVID positive, any student, whether they're reading or not, anyone in a 6-foot radius, because someone's mask is off, needs to be quarantined as per the right. So that's why you.
but only if, I'm sorry, excuse me, I just need to cut you off there. I'm sorry. But only if the person without the mask is the COVID positive.
No.
But it can't be anybody. Only anybody who doesn't have a mask on.
No, because the rule is 3 feet in the instructional setting with 4 people with a mask on.
Mm-hmm.
So if one of them don't have a mask on, the whole 6-foot radius gets knocked down.
That doesn't make sense to me, and I'm going to explain to you why. Because and maybe I'm misunderstanding it or not. But if the person who is COVID positive is wearing a mask, and there were 5 people within 6 feet, but only one of them doesn't have a mask, why would the other person having a mask need to be quarantined?
No, the people, the 2 masked people, all the masked people are fine, but the unmasked, when the people are.
Yeah, okay, I think you said it a little differently, or maybe I interpreted it a little differently. You said, hey, if one person doesn't have a mask on, everybody in the 6 feet is quarantined.
It depends where the person is. So if the person eating is COVID positive, everybody around that person.
Because that person doesn't have a mask on.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
But also.
And at one point, that person is eating.
True, I understood, right, so.
And the kids around, it's alternating in terms of whether they're eating or
No,
not.
listen, I get it, and obviously it needs to be configured differently, if something happens.
So I don't even know if it has been. I asked Dr. Colson to take a look at that, but I haven't followed up with him.
So I guess my point in the question is, I'd like a determination, maybe it's by building, and I'm not expecting you to have this right now, but as we move through the year, I wanna understand if it's a breakdown in the mask policy, or are we being overly cautious with quarantining people? Or recommending they be quarantined to the health department who determines quarantine?
No, actually, the way it works is we determine the close contact and then.
Notify the health department, they determine, I get that, but.
Yeah, I don't think we're being overly cautious.
Because my concern is, I find it, and I'm gonna cut you off, it's just with where we are right now, and everybody's supposed to be wearing a mask, and the way that the close contact has been redefined, if you have a mask, if both people are wearing a mask, then, you don't need to be quarantined. To be quarantined, you have to be maskless for 15 minutes. That's a good amount of time outside of the classroom for somebody to be in proximity to somebody maskless. So that's where I'm struggling, right? 15 minutes is a long time to be around somebody that's COVID positive without a mask on, without there being some sort of corrective action by a staff to say, you need your mask on. And for anybody who's watching, when your kid's quarantined, I mean, that's the incentive to wear your mask, right? Whether you don't want it or not. Some of my kids who hate the mask, listen, if you wear the mask, you won't be quarantined. You shouldn't be quarantined.
The large numbers that you're seeing is one from the middle school with the lunch incident.
Yeah, I get that, yeah.
And the other one was a bus driver and a matron were positive on a bus that transported 3 groups of schools.
So they didn't have masks on?
No, they had masks on, but they're not students that the 3-foot mark. Right?
So there's different rules for the bus drivers than there is
No,
for the students?
well, there's different rules for adults. So students are 3 foot, totally masked, are fine. Okay, adults don't fall into that. So the drivers took out a number of students on all 3 of those buses.
But I'm struggling to understand how it's different, right? If they're wearing a mask and the kids are wearing a mask, why was anyone quarantined?
It's supposed to be 6 foot.
Because it's inside the 6 foot.
So an adult,
6 foot.
so an adult is 6 foot, a student is 3 foot?
And
the instructional setting.
Adult, yes.
An instructional setting means classroom, not the cafeteria, right?
Correct. Classroom, all physical education is 6 feet, music is 6 feet.
Just puts an exclamation point on my frustration with how little sense many of these guidelines face. I don't get the difference, but, okay. Now that I know that, that's fine, but I mean, it's one of those things where, I mean, if we all want reporting, I'd like to understand, whether it's at meetings, I'm not asking for a standard report, but I would like to understand that when we get large numbers of quarantine, I would like to know that it was a bus incident, Boston and Matron were positive, there's different rules for adults in communication with students. Now, there was an issue with, I believe, 4 students and 1 staff member at the high school. I know you said you don't know, but I would like to know, maybe in the update tomorrow, if that's a similar situation that, everybody wore their masks, was doing what they were supposed to, but they're still quarantined. And vaccination doesn't come into any play with.
No, it doesn't.
So I'm to assume that the bus driver and the matron were not vaccinated.
Well, regardless, they're COVID positive, right? So it's, if it was
I
somebody.
see what you're saying. So if the person who was in close contact was vaccinated, it would be different.
Just quickly piggyback on what Gina said with the lockers for signing up for those that want it. I think that would be really very important. I know that you did jot that down, but I just want to piggyback on that. And then to Chris's point with the temperature checks, I understand that it is, maybe a secondary precaution. I don't know how many we've caught with higher temperatures. What I have noted though is that because of the temperature checks, we do tend to have to bottleneck students. Then we are creating, at the high school, yes, it is outside, but I have seen outside where they don't have the mask on as they're bottlenecking in. And again, they don't have to wear them outside, but I do think that that might be something that we can remove from our reopening, and I'm just giving my feedback on it, because it is causing more of a delay getting into the buildings, and they are bottlenecking coming into the buildings, especially in areas like the high school. We're only doing it at, I think, 2 locations.
Yeah, the high school issue, the first couple of days were really a result of the students not having their IDs.
But no, but I did drop off in the morning, so I do see where it, where the breakdown is of, and I see the students coming in, so I'm able to see it each morning. Yes, it has gotten better with the drop off, but I do see it each morning. And at the middle school as well, and for something that I do feel like, I don't know, I mean, if you could get us the data, how many times we've had a high temperature that's been COVID
That's what I'd like to
positive.
know.
Yeah, I think they're far and few between.
Exactly, and I, from what I'm seeing, what's happening, I don't know that they're necessarily.
And if we're having positives, right, we had 4 or 5 today at the high school, none of them were caught with temperature checks. Right, so it's not like, it just seems to be a useless process to me.
Or bottlenecking them in the high school where we are having trouble with transportation, the temperature check is taking them longer to get to class. Because they have to stop to get the temperature check, and granted, it's fairly quick, but I do see the line. I drop off at I leave my house at 6:45, I'm at the high school by 6:48, and there's already a line for temperature checks at 6:48 in the morning. So.
And I think if I can just, one more point, and it might be unpopular, but it's just one more of those protocols that, in my opinion, just has a negative impact on the psyche of our students, our young students. It really does. I know some people don't really buy that, and they talk about it, but it creates anxiety for some students. And I speak from experience because, some of my children have that same issue, and it's just one more regulation, one more protocol that reminds them that we are not in a normal setting. And that's really not the place I want my young children to have their mindset when they're walking into school.
I'm trying to weigh the comments that I'm hearing with what I think I understood Dr. Gianni to say, that the building principals wanted to continue to do it.
Yeah, for just some time. I mean, we are going to revisit it.
Okay.
And I've already approached them about discontinuing it. But given the beginning of the school year, and the unknown with the Delta, it wasn't causing a delay in getting kids in. They said, let's keep it for now. And I agree with that. It makes faculty, staff, and even some students feel safer.
Okay. I just wanted the
No, I get it. I
explanation.
just think you're looking at, I think sometimes when we have these discussions, we're really not looking at the big picture. We're looking at what we think works best. And I'm not saying every kid is depressed over, temperature checks, but it is one more step that reminds them that things aren't normal. And I don't know that kids need to really live that every day. If the situation was different, I would get it. But with the number of people vaccinated and all these different protocols, and we know that school is the safest place they're going to be. But the point is, one little thing can have a positive impact on the number of students in their overall psyche while they're in school. So I would like us, when we discuss with administration on what we should do, this I feel like the overreach or the extended, protocols have impacts on others besides those who have to put those protocols in place. And I feel like we're not thinking about that enough when we're talking about reopening. We're not really thinking like it's bothering me, and I know there's not much that can be done, but it's bothering me to see and find out that students are isolated from their friends at the time that they're supposed to socialize at lunch, in the middle school. And 6th grade is a really big deal because they don't get to change class and see different faces. So to find out that, my kids are in a desk surrounded by kids they don't know because we decided, well, we have to do this, let's just put them over there. I don't know that enough thought went into really what's best for the kids while they're there, while keeping them safe. That's what I keep hearing, and it started last year, and I'm real frustrated by it. I really am, because I gotta live it every day. And it goes back to recess last year at the elementary schools, and it was almost like man, it's so hard for us to manage, even though it would be such a great thing for the kids. We're taking, the easier path sometimes. And I don't mean, and I understand, the pressure and the effort on everybody in education, specifically administration. So I don't say that lightly. I just think it's fatigue from everybody having to deal with it. It's like, well, this makes it easy for us to track because we have so much to do. I would just like the conversation when we discuss these things to be a little bit different and say, how does this benefit our children? Is this, can we get rid of this and will it have a positive impact on their psyche and alleviate some anxiety? That's all I'm really asking for. I'm not really trying to throw stones. The administration knows how much I respect what they do and how hard they work and how difficult this is. Everything in education is incredibly stressful right now. But I'd like to just make sure we're focusing on how stressful it is for our kids walking in the door.
When
That's
you
all.
report back to us on these issues, could you throw into it the courtyard and the recess issues at the middle school? Because at the end of last year, we were told that there were some renovations that were being done, so there could be more outdoor activity during lunch, and I'd like to know the status of that.
The problem is there is no
how that-
recess at the middle school, and
how
as we,
it should be.
there should be,
It could be.
but the point is, it's September 15th. We're talking 5-6 weeks here of time, so something's gotta be decided and done soon. We can't wait for the next meeting. We can't, let's have a committee meeting. Let's talk about, it's like, we gotta make some decisions on what it does for the overall experience of our students, and that's all I'm asking.
I'm sorry, just want to, if you don't mind, the lunch issue, I think, is most prevalent at the middle school because the kids can't even have their phones.
Correct.
So at the high school level, it's a little different, at least they're allowed to have their phones. But the rule at the middle school is that they can't even have their phones. So they eat, they're separated, they have nothing else going on throughout the day. So I do think that issue really is at the middle school level. And I apologize for interrupting you.
I was just gonna say, I brought this up last year to all of you. The first day I went to that tour, I almost cried because it looked like a prison in there, and I said that to you. And I said that they should be allowed to use their cell phones, kids are gonna get in trouble, this is not good for their psyche. Dr. Polson said he didn't want the cell phones. I said, then you need to do something with these kids. I'm really upset that a year later, these kids are still bored and not doing anything during lunch. When they were supposed to have some input, me and Cameron asked if they could have a committee. This isn't up to the board, this is up to administration to figure out how to do it. There shouldn't be a need for another meeting, but it should have been a roll-off for what happened last year, which never happened. So we should have already had this figured out. Because these kids, even if they use the courtyard, if we can get half the cafeteria out like they do in elementary school, that's gonna lessen the quarantine exposure. So and the distance, so we can literally have a even smaller group doing these activities. And it's just the mood in those cafeterias, and the high school's not like this, neither are the elementary schools. The mood in that cafeteria, and both of them, are so dark and gloomy that I'd be depressed eating lunch there. And that's on a normal day. With my friend right next to me, it's not good for anybody's psyche. And I really wish that this would have been done last year like we requested. And it's really disheartening that Chris is saying that still nothing is happening this year.
Well, I don't want the board to think nothing is happening because the recommendation that came from the students for the civic project was taken very, very well. Administration is working right now with the students and how that will look.
Okay,
And
good.
I've already asked Dr. Wilson to fast track that.
Okay, good.
So we have not forgotten about that. And you're correct, I don't need to come to the board to get authorization to do it, that's an administrative function.
Yeah.
And as soon as it's prepared to be rolled out, we will roll it out.
Thank you.
Just one more comment on opening day, because we don't provide transportation to the pre-K center. Drop-off and pickup was the lines of the car were quite long, and we mentioned that in our review. That you had reached out to the county to do a traffic study, so you
Yeah.
can just stay on top of them too.
We will, and we have not heard back from them.
I figured it.
I thought we reached out when the center opened.
No, we did, and the county, because everything shut down, said that they felt that the study couldn't be done because we weren't having the transportation issues that were really happening with cars, with no buses, with people dropping off. So they said they would like to wait till spring, which they did not do, which we reminded them at the beginning of the school year to reinstitute that study. So I don't know where they are, we haven't heard back.
I have another question.
And to speak to the issue at South Haven, I did address that with administration. I know they looked at it, but we did get a call today as well, so I have to revisit.
That it improved?
Well, I believe it did improve, but we did get a call from the parent today that we need to follow up.
Okay. Okay, very well.
I remember the legislative committee, is that what we call it?
Yeah.
I remember them sending a letter to the town about, roadway damage in front of our country hall.
That was
It
fixed.
was fixed? I mean,
Oh, it was fixed immediately.
Okay, okay, I
Yeah,
just
the
didn't,
potholes.
yeah,
Yes.
I just don't remember hearing it.
They did a nice job paving all of Station Road
Yeah.
and Dalton for that matter.
Are we good on reopening?
I think, no more questions, right?
So I didn't know if the board wanted to talk about the open meetings law piece. Not too long ago, the legislature reauthorized and approved the virtual meetings for at least through January 15th.
Well,
I don't know if the
I
board-
don't know if we really need to have a full-blown discussion. If anybody disagrees with me on this, you'll tell me, but, a few meetings ago, we had one of our members who was, out sick but able to participate by video conference, came in by video conference while the rest of us were at the table, and that enabled the entire board to have the meeting, and it worked. And that would still be permitted under this current situation, I believe, correct?
I think so. Did you hear the question?
Yes.
Yes, the very.
So, I don't know that there's any change or any adjustment that we need to be made. I think it's flexible enough that we can, schedule our meetings in person as long as it works, and if not, we can have, the videos are virtual, at least through middle of January or so. And we can talk about it then if we need
There is
to.
a legislative priority in this, priorities on this topic that I'll get into later.
Right, well, I think that may be a little bit different, because that would be authorizing it pretty much indefinitely. It
No,
would be
well,
a
so,
change to
well,
the
the
open
law,
meetings.
authorizes you to video conferencing, you just have to give your location.
Right.
That's what the legislative ask is, to remove the
Right, and that's why I'm,
policy of reporting your location and making it available to anybody else.
and that's why we've got the next section to discuss some of these resolutions, and the fact that our, Nassau Suffolk School Board Association and even the New York State School Board Association has, legislative people who do negotiations on behalf of us. And that's one of the things that would be an improvement to the open meetings law, in my opinion. To be able to have a virtual meeting for somebody who had to be away, but who did have the time to be part of the meeting. So, if we could just hold that, and I think if we have nothing else, actually we have the board priorities, which would be next.
Yes, so our next item for discussion is the board priorities for the 21-22 school year. As we discussed at our previous meeting, I sent the previous school year's priorities to our board advisory committees, their subcommittees, as well as student support services for review and input. That input received and has been incorporated into the draft before you. You will also notice on that draft that I have highlighted the mission statement, and that is because we are currently reviewing the strategic plan, which will more than likely change the mission statement as well. So I'm not asking the board to look at that or to approve that. I'm just asking you to look at those priorities. Really, they're in essence the same, just some changes in order and grammatic. And hopefully the board can review that and either give me some input or proceed.
I had my red pen out again. And so that the kind of things I marked up just had to be with, developing a budget for, it said 2021 to 22, it ought to be updated to this year. Shouldn't it?
Yeah, it should be. It should.
Yeah,
21, 22.
That's what we're in right now.
Oh, right.
Right, so, anyway,
That's not
Those-
the problem.
so there were some editing things like that
Mhm.
that I don't think y'all would care about. But, I did feel like I would like to have down where we're developing a fiscally responsible budget. I'd like to have some language in there that talked about how it's also not just delivering the best educational program, but also meeting our long-range planning goals. Because, you know, we've talked about some of the big capital issues that we're facing in the not-distant future, and I would like to see the budget process be incorporated along with the facilities plan. And under strategic planning goals, number 2, I'd just like to, you know, we create a culture of appreciation where we're holding ourselves accountable for student success. Yes, we are the ones responsible for it. But I also think that there ought to be a recognition of all the contributions to those successes, you know, from administration and teachers and the teaching assistants and the building staff, you know, everybody. I was just hoping maybe to get a little reference in there.
And that, we could do that during the plan as well.
Okay,
Okay, because those are really part of the strategic plan as well.
okay.
Any other on the board priorities though?
I have one other observation. With respect to the social emotional, item number 3 on the board priorities.
Mhm.
The last sentence where it says, specifically within the areas of equity and education, but then it goes down to say, social and emotional support for students and staff, and it was raised in this component a couple of meetings ago that, you know, what are we really doing to support that social emotional accommodation and commitment and growth? I'd like to hear more about the specifics of how we're going to go about it.
Sure, we have a plan in place through our guidance office. We can provide that.
Okay. Here. That's
Just one
my
thing
red,
on,
my red pen comment.
just on, board priority number 2, where it says remote teaching and learning. Since we are starting to move more towards a new work normal, I guess we could say, could we change that to technology in teaching and learning? Because we have learned from the pandemic, and now technology will be there. So replacing the words remote teaching and learning to technology in teaching and learning.
Which paragraph is that?
That is in board priority number 3.
Okay. Oh,
You see what I'm talking about,
Right.
Johnny?
I see, but I'm not seeing where you're fitting it. Is that,
Take away the word remote
Oh,
and make that
just,
technology in teaching and learning.
oh. Or inclusion of technology in teaching and learning?
Well, it says specifically in the areas of equity and education, technology in teaching and learning, and social emotional support for students and staff.
I think the way Melissa said it works.
Right. Because we're really, you know, as opposed to using the word remote, is really, we are maintaining the technology or an aspect of the technology. Whether it be in person or homework assignments. So I do think that that needs to be a priority, and we have standards coming down the pipe that we still have to meet in next year.
how about educational technology?
You can change it to educational technology. You just want to
So
override
in
Ken here.
replacement of remote teaching and learning.
Can we also add the subcommittees to the list as well?
I don't know.
So, committees to the
Like,
list.
equity,
Well, these are priorities. Why
No,
would
I'm
we-
talking about underneath, it's a board advisory committee.
Point out where, oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Okay,
There's
on
some strategic
the second
planning.
page.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure. Those are just really, you know, a guide to what they are, but sure, we could
think, in terms of substance, I think it's here. Especially when I'm hearing that there's gonna be suggested revisions to our mission statement, our vision statement. I look forward to seeing that. So, do y'all feel comfortable approving the priorities tonight, subject to
Those changes.
the grammar type editing and the change about technology?
Yeah, I have adding, meeting our long-range planning goals in 6, changing remote teaching and learning to ed technology, obviously 2021, 22 to 22, 23, and I think I got it. Was there anything I missed? I see students here.
Yeah, that was just a
So
sort of grammar.
if that's acceptable, I would like to go that, because the quicker, we get this out to share decision making, we ask everyone to focus around the board's priorities.
So, all in favor of, let's make a motion. Is there a motion to approve? Ms. Belize, and the second, Ms. Aruda, and no more questions or discussion. Okay, we have, all in favor, it's unanimously approved.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And next now is the New York State School Board Association resolutions, and I think both Ms. Felice and Mr. Puccini were gonna report on those.
I can talk from the perspective of the Nassau Suffolk School Board Association. So, actually, I forgot my notes, but I just realized that the updated version I got today had the answers to the test on it. So, so everybody understands Nassau Suffolk is just, is a body that represents 100 schools from Long Island. And what we do at our Monday meeting, ahead of the annual meeting, the dinner meeting, which is a virtual dinner meeting again this year, is take the priorities from New York State School Board Association that are submitted from member districts throughout the state and decide if Nassau Suffolk School Board Association is going to support or not, or amend any of these legislative priorities. For the most part, the first, and it's hard because my worksheet that we use is different from the information you all get. So if anybody has any questions on discussion Nassau Suffolk had on a specific resolution, without my notes, I should be able to pull it from memory. But the first 17 were all supported by Nassau Suffolk School Board Association. And then all of the proposed bylaw changes were not recommended by Nassau Suffolk. So this goes to their dinner meeting or our dinner meeting later this month. It's voted on by the member school districts as to whether or not they're going to be supported or not, and then it's kicked up to NISBA, and it's voted on by the general membership at the annual convention. So if anybody has specifics on any of the priorities and they'd like to understand the perspective discussed by Nassau Suffolk, I'd be happy to address that.
If you don't mind, Ms. Felice, can I just ask a question there? So for the Nassau Suffolk meeting that you've reported about, you said what, the resolutions 1 through 17.
The first 17, which are the resolutions.
Right.
Have all been.
There were also, after that, it shows proposed bylaws and
All of those,
resolutions that are
I did
not
say,
recommended.
those are all not recommended.
So basically what our local group is doing is taking the same position as the state school board association. Because this right here in the state literature says they're not recommending it.
They're not recommending for adoption, correct. So basically, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay. Yes.
Okay, yes, to, agree with Chris, yes, the first 17 are being recommended. Some of them sunset after they've been on the docket for a while and they don't gain passage, then they go away and new resolutions are brought into the priorities. So, one of the resolutions I briefly discussed with Ms. Doyle before the meeting and told her I was gonna be asking the question. One of the resolutions is to allow students with disability to be tested at their developmental age, not their chronological age. And Ms. Doyle, expressed to me that that is something that we already do here in South Country, speaking to that we are usually ahead of the curve. And just want to confirm that that was, our conversation, Ms. Doyle?
So what type of testing were they referring?
That's, well, what it says is differently able students should be allowed to take exams at their developmental age rather than their chronological age. Schools should test children at the developmental age, which bases, their capacity on their emotional, physical, cognitive, and social functions.
So when the IEP is developed, that's what they're looking at,
Okay.
is developmentally where students are. It doesn't go by their grade or their chronological age.
So it's kind of hard for me to believe that that's not already part of the law.
Yeah, if they have an IEP, then that it's written in there and the goals are based on where they are and we track progress from where they are and set goals for where we want them to be, and that is not necessarily a grade level and it's definitely not an age
Okay.
requirement.
So it's something that we wouldn't stand in opposition of.
I don't believe so.
Okay. That was my one question out of those 17 resolutions. The only one that jumped out at me. The other one that, Mr. Pacini did raise about, the open meeting law is, yes, there is a resolution in there to eliminate the need to disclose your address if you're going to be remote. That seems like something reasonable that we would want to stand in support of. So, I would say that yes, we should agree to what the, NISBA is supporting. Some other issues that I just wanted to raise to the board, just to be aware, NISBA's commitment is again to equity, to level the playing field for all of our students. Equity when it comes to digital access, equity when it comes to mental and student health, equity when it comes to, school nutrition, school safety, and also a big, write-up in the priorities, which, let me just back up. I just want to thank our district clerk for putting this booklet together, because we get these emails, and I only have a black and white printer at home, and I just, it's a lot of pages, and I needed something that had more order to it, because this is a working document that we're gonna use throughout the year, especially as our legislative committee gets underway, and so thank you very much for putting this together for me, because it was very helpful. But something that they spoke about with respect to mandate relief, we talk about mandate relief all the time, and the issues that we're talking about in delivering equity for our students doesn't always come with the funding that we need. And so some of the advocacy is going to be on that mandate relief, and in particular to the changes in student enrollment. And 1 out of 5 students will require some sort of assistance, and something that costs more to deliver education, and that we have to be aware that our students coming into districts now that is being seen across New York are poorer, have experienced more trauma, have more special needs, have more developmental needs, and have more mental health needs. And so those are issues that this board and other board of education are going to have to face. And then two other things in conclusion was, again, we spoke about this at, I think we spoke about it at the audit committee, looking at revenue resources and recurring revenue resources, and looking at the payment in lieu of taxes and the discounts that the industrial development agencies give to businesses to incentivize them to come into areas, but it's at a cost. And they don't pay their full freight of taxes initially to develop in our district, but the district loses. So we really do have to stay on top of that. And then finally, with respect to construction costs, Wicks law revision. And I don't really understand the whole concept of the Wicks law, so I'd ask Ms. Costa to help me. But it has to do with construction and how the state contracts are awarded, where if you were to hire a general contractor and you would hire your plumber, your electrician, your heating and ventilation, there's restrictions as to how that can be done in school systems, which can increase costs unnecessarily. So there's going to be revisions to the Wicks law. The one issue I didn't agree with the priorities was revisions to the tail law. And that has to do with your extending benefits beyond the length of a contract. That's the way we keep and retain good teachers, good staff. And, I wouldn't stand in support of revisions to the Taylor law because of that. If we want things to sunset in contracts, we should put sunset language in there. But, things that continue beyond the life of the contract, like steps, I think we would lose teachers if we weren't awarding steps after the contract expires. That's just not something that is conducive to keeping a good working staff there. So that's the review of this lengthy document. And I would like to, if Ms. Pacini is available, maybe we can get together to discuss the direction of the legislative committee, and we can start moving ahead with, with our individual needs.
Yeah, I do have a few more comments, and I apologize just because I forgot my notes, but Cheryl was speaking of a couple of things that I did want to bring up. I can't find, there was one piece about about BOCES that I kind of objected to, and had to do with EVAs. I'll find it, and we'll talk about it another time, but I have some concerns about how the whole bid process goes with BOCES, but I'll table that. The two open meetings law resolutions, I did want to mention that while number 8, which was not having disclosure location, I think is a no-brainer. I did have an issue with the next one, which the committee chose to support, which was a change that authorizes, it is open meetings law to enhance opportunities to conduct business via remote technology, authorize committees to meet via video conferencing without a fixed meeting location, and eliminate the requirement to identify location for the public. That last part I don't have an issue with. My problem with it, just my own personal opinion, is that breeds apathy if everything can be done remotely. I think there should be, and I brought this up and it didn't go over well, but there should be stipulations of why you can't be there. You're ill, you're injured, you're out of town business or something like that. But I wouldn't want to see a board member say, well, it's raining out, so I'm going to stay in comfort of my own home. Vice versa, when you go to the way the second one reads, it talks about committees. I'd have a problem with every committee meeting was no longer in person. I think that's a little difficult to conduct business that way. That's my personal opinion. So I think it kind of, again, breeds some apathy. There was something else in here.
Can I just come in on that?
Sure, go ahead.
Just because that would be permitted by the law, doesn't mean we had to do it.
Correct. No, understood.
So purposes of what I think we're supposed to do tonight, because I think there's a little time pressure.
The 17th.
The 17th, that's Friday. We have to indicate whether we support those first 17 resolutions or not. And I don't mean to cut you off there,
Sure, that's fine.
I just want to keep that on the table so we remember to deal with that. Okay? So
The other one that I thought was interesting that Isabel Nassau Suffolk chose to support is a legislative priority that would mandate that all employees are subject to the same immunization requirements as students. So that one I thought would probably end up being a little controversial, but it was kind of interesting. I kind of forget that that's not a thing right now. So I don't think a lot of people realize that.
So what was the Nassau Suffolk?
They chose to support it.
To support it. What number is that?
That is number 14.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think if that was the stuff about, this was number 17. NISBA to support state aid eligibility for school districts that are obligated to pay tuition reimbursement for unilateral private placements. I did hear in that meeting that, maybe you heard this, Dr. Gianni or Ms. Doyle, that the Riverhead Charter School is seeking to expand. Did anybody else hear that? I mean, that has some concern. So with the way reimbursement goes for that. So that was something that was out there.
And that remains part of their positions on, opposing the expansion of charter.
Yeah.
Charter schools.
That's all I have.
All right, so in listening to both of you, and also, this has been submitted to the board and updates and by email. Would you be recommending that we sign on to what Nassau Suffolk School Board Association has said, which is to support the first 17 resolutions of the state?
Yes.
Okay. Is that right, Chris?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
That you would have us agree with Nassau Suffolk School Board Association and sign on to support the first 17 resolutions.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I would say that I've never seen any of these ever get voted down at the meeting anyway. So, I mean, I think it's kind of like symbolic.
No, but you know what I like about this is for the first time, we're actually having a discussion about these things, and I can't tell you how many meetings I sat out there listening to board meetings and never hearing a board discuss, the resolutions and the legislative activities that go on with the School Boards Association. So I'm glad we're doing that. So do you just want to take a consensus?
So I guess
to have a motion to authorize them to submit our response by the 17th?
Yeah, so I guess before that though, I mean, as of now, I don't know that whether or not I'm going to attend the resolution meeting. So if nobody's going, it doesn't matter. But you have to be there to vote. So, I will try to make it. I can't remember the date. I'll go back. But it is virtual.
Representative to appear.
The 18th of October.
10 of October, okay. So we have procedurally two things that I know of we have to do. One, we've got to make sure we'll have a representative at the meeting on October 18th. And maybe we'll pick the representative and then have a backup in place. And then the other thing we need to do is appoint a member of our board as the advocacy liaison to the state School Board Association for this year. Last year it was Cheryl Felice. So we need to do those two things procedurally, and then we need to determine.
There's one more thing we need to do. We need to email the New York State School Board Association by the 17th.
That's what I was trying to get at.
Oh, I'm
so we've got to have somebody who's going to undertake to do that.
Okay.
So in terms of the advocacy liaison, I'm just looking around the table. Do we want to make any changes, or do we want to continue to have Ms. Felice do it?
And don't feel bad if you want to make a change.
No, I'm fine with this.
Okay. So we'll have Ms. Felice will continue as our advocacy liaison. And then we have Mr. Puccini as the representative to appear at the Nassau Suffolk School Board Association.
Yeah, I can attend meetings a little bit. That's fine.
You can do that.
That's fine.
Okay. So we've done both of those things, and then now the third thing is our response that's due by Friday. That'll be made by Ms. Felice on behalf of the board.
You want me to make it, or do you want to do the email?
Who's supposed to do
It
it?
doesn't say. It just says members who wish to submit amendment. Well, that's a resolution. It doesn't say who has to submit.
Is there just something there that, like, I would sign?
It just gives the email address.
Honestly, if we don't oppose anything, I don't know.
Yeah, it's probably, you're right. You're probably right. It's if we wanted to make any changes.
Yeah, if we're not opposing anything and we don't want to make a statement against it, there's no reason to communicate with them. It would just be handled with the resolution.
Sort of informally, just.
Yeah.
Thanks for your hard work. We appreciate it. All right, so I guess we're done then.
No?
No, I know, with regard to that. No, you're not off the hook yet. So back to you.
Okay, fourth item for discussion is a second reading of Board Policy 7110, Comprehensive Student Attendance. Attendance, as I had mentioned at our earlier meetings, was a big concern last year during the pandemic. In our equity work, it also became the focus of the forming of an attendance committee. And and a review of the comprehensive attendance policy. Equity Committee noted our current policy was punitive, tying course credit to attendance, thereby not permitting implementation of the corrective attendance plan so students can recover and be successful. The revisions remove the language so we can address poor attendance in a positive manner so students can be successful. The Strategic Planning Committee and Council has reviewed and approved these revisions, and I offer this for a second reading and the board's action.
Is there a motion to approve the policy 7110? Let's see. Ms. Ancona and then Ms. Felice seconded it. Any questions or discussion? Mr. Trent?
Dr. Johnny, are we still reporting the attendance numbers to the state, or is that just only COVID numbers?
What attendance?
Of our students daily, was it attendance or COVID numbers?
No, we were reporting COVID numbers.
Not attendance.
Not attendance. And we are reporting COVID numbers to the state.
Okay, no further questions or discussion. All in favor of approving this policy, raise your hand. It's unanimously approved.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I think that, I think you're gonna do an omnibus.
I am
for the
gonna
learning,
try
so
to
I don't
do
know if
that.
you want me to-
Why don't we get the motion and
You
then?
want me to try to do it for you?
Just GHI.
What's
Yeah,
your
yeah.
job?
Yeah,
Yeah.
really all it is.
Yeah, I got it right there.
You want me to do it or you
No,
want
I
me to
got
do
it.
Okay.
Okay, is there a motion to approve items G,
Well, you're not gonna leave me.
and I, and Mr. Trent?
Which way she loves.
And Ms. Aruda has seconded it. Now, any questions or discussion about anything here? All in favor of approving items G, H, and I, it's unanimous.
Okay, before the board moves on, I do wanna mention one of the board's approvals that they just did on the personnel. And please join me in welcoming Erin Qualley, who is going to do some sort of this speech. Welcome to the family, and I'm so sorry you didn't sit down.
I'm excited to be here.
Make sure they wear sweaters.
That's it, unless there's any closing remarks from anybody. Mr. Trent has a closing remark.
So we could just get, open safety committee to kind of, do what they can to, address the, vaping in the school. I really want to talk about that more in the committee. We could,
Okay, they can certainly talk about it, but that's something that we really should charge back to the building and the counselors. But why not, when's the next meeting?
Whatever we can do to start to talk about that issue.
Let me put together to let you know what we are doing, because you're right, it's a big issue. It is a big issue. And we think a lot of it has come from the pandemic.
It's stunning how much education there is about how bad it is for you and how prevalent it still is. Like, I'm floored by how many kids are vaping.
Yeah.
And it's just getting worse, and I would have thought it would have gotten better, but I'm seeing it, kids that I never in a million years would have thought. And they're so easy to get, and with the legalization of recreational marijuana, it's only gonna get easier.
Did you have a closing
I
remark?
do, I have a couple quick things. I think I may have mentioned this before, and something Ann said today made me think of it. I would like to, we used to do it years ago, I would like to get back to some employee recognitions on a regular basis.
I'm trying to signal Brent to see if she had anything.
Oh.
I don't wanna close that off.
I think we could, we should do a little bit more employee recognition, employee of the quarter or something like that, recognize different people in different areas of our staff, whether it's building and grounds, teaching, administrative, whatever else it is. I see a lot of neighboring districts do that stuff. I would just like to make sure we're going out of our way to recognize those that are going above and beyond. I don't know if anybody agrees, but I just think it's a nice thing to do.
Well, to add on to that also, with, their anniversary, 10, 15, 20 years. Last year was an individual who was 64 years, and I really felt that she should have been appreciated, so we can do that, that would be good.
More of a quick note in regards to Nassau Suffolk School Board Association. Some of you may or may not, I know Anna Smith, Vecchio, the board president of Williamsburg School District. He has resigned his position at the Williamsburg School District, and he is now the full-time director of the Nassau Suffolk School Board Association. So that's been going for a while, but he is leaving his position there. I mention it only because he's been a friend to me for a number of years, and he's been a great resource to me as a board member. So, I wish him well. We'll miss him. And then I do want to welcome Bryn again. I don't know if everyone realizes Bryn's a 10th grader. I don't think we've ever had a 10th grader. I know we had a junior one year. And I thought you handled yourself very well tonight for something. This is not an easy place to do it. I think you've done it better than most of the seniors we've had up here. So welcome and good luck, and looking forward to having you here all year.
Thank you. And, I didn't want to put you on the spot for a closing remark, but how did you find your first meeting?
It was good.
Okay.
We'll try to make you shorter next time.
Now have you
She has no school tomorrow, she's.
you have emailed contact for, if there's something that you think needs to be on the agenda, reach out.
Okay.
You know how to reach me. Okay, a motion to adjourn, because Trent got his hand up first. I know, and then right behind that.
I'll do an auction with Mr. Trent.
Yeah. No, okay, all in favor, I think this one's unanimous.
It certainly is. Good night.
Yeah.